We are back, and it looks like I'm going to make yet another chessboard. This time it's going to be out of ash and zebra wood, which I really like. I haven't yet decided if I'm going to put borders of purple heart yet or not, but I'm definitely going to make zebra wood and ash the two contrasting colors of this board. So the first thing I have to do is cut these in half. So, I'll turn them, and let's see if we can't get to cut it. As usual, I don't usually plug these in until I'm ready to use them. Let's rock and roll, shall we? With our 2x2s cut in half, now we're going to cut the lengths in half. These are 36 inches or around, so I'm going to cut them in half at 18 inches, and that should give us about 4 inches either way to trim off, which is fine. It's more than enough. So, let's get to rocking. Now we have 4 equal sides of each species. 1, 2, and the other side 3, 4 gives us 8. And as everyone knows, a chessboard across is 8. So we're good. We got our strips. We've got them to where we need to plane them so that they're all the same size. They're uniform. So that when you begin to put them together, they don't go all wonky. Best way to do that is to plane them. So let's get to that. Alright, this is the part where I usually make my first glue up. What you do is you glue your contrasting strips together, and as soon as it's dried, you cross cut them, and then you go about making your chessboard. However, I think this time I'm simply going to glue 4 sheets together, and then the other 4 strips I'll glue together separately. The reason I'm doing that is because I only have a 12.5 inch planer, and if I do all 8 strips, it won't be able to fit into the planer, and I tend to sand unevenly. I'm hoping by gluing just 4 strips together at a time, I can feed them through the planer and make sure they're completely flush before I go about my second glue up, and try to mitigate some of those hills and valleys. We'll see how it works. Alright then, welcome back. It's starting to get cold out, so I only open the door when I need to vent some dust. Sorry about the noise. The wood shop is a noisy place. Anyway, we finished our first glue up, and I did something different. I'm going to send 2 separate pieces through the planer. Usually I make the first glue up with all 8 strips, and then I sand. But what I've discovered is I get dips. They're mild dips, but they're dips. I'm thinking, and my planer is only 12.5 inches wide, which is, when you got 8 strips together, it's about 14.5 inches that you're going to need. I think it usually is 15.5. So I'm thinking if I do 2 separate strips, I can plane them. Planing doesn't necessarily make it so you don't have to sand, but almost. I can go straight to 220 on this after I've properly planed it. So anyway, let's get to planing these 2 pieces, and then we'll start our second glue up and see how that goes. We are back, or you are. We've completed our first glue up on the chessboard, and now it's time to square one end and make sure that it's perfectly square with the contrasting strips. And then we will begin cross-cutting for our chessboard. I think the best way to do that is by using my trusty dusty, but not in the least bit rusty miter saw. Okay, I think I'm funny. You and my wife may not agree. I genuinely apologize for the lighting. Obviously I'm not a professional. I'm just a guy who likes to play in his garage/wood shop. I've made a few chessboards before. I know what I'm doing, despite having ruined 1 or 2. Hopefully that is completely squared on one side. Now we can begin cross-cutting. Woohoo! What I have done is measure the width of each one of these strips. I have measured the exact same distance from where the blade cuts to my fence. Now what we need to do is cross-cut each one of these pieces. And without further hesitation, let's rock and roll. We are ready for our second glue up, and I think it's looking all right. We've got our checkerboard pattern. It's not completely flush, but I can sand out these, and there's some pits in some of these boards. There's nothing I can do about that except sand them out, so I'm going to have to sand them. I thought that I could do like my charcuterie boards and just glue these 4 strips together and run them through the planer, but to be quite honest, I'm a little worried that my planer will cause some of these squares to come apart, chip out. When it's all glued and the border's in there, it's going to be solid as concrete, but I'm just a little leery of shoving it through the planer. So as always, what you do is, every other board you put your cross cut. Alright, so it looks like that, and every other strip you turn. The trick is making sure that all the squares align with one another as you go along. I made a board, I don't know, last week, 2 weeks ago, and I did not completely square the board. I thought I had. And so one half of the board was a little askew, actually the last 3 strips. And so when I finished the board, it's completely useless. I can't sell it, I can't use it, I can't gift it, because it's just askew enough that you notice it bad. So I'm real leery of that. So with that said, let's start to gluing some of these pieces together. Now again, you want to be fairly liberal with the glue, because you do not want these pieces coming apart. And I intend to put a border on this board, as well as these individual squares and then the strips glued together. So it should be very secure, because there will be wood glue on all four sides of each one of these squares that I've cut. And also there'll be a border that I'm going to put on here. I haven't decided what kind of wood yet, but I'm working on that. And so you just want them to be really nice. Another mistake that I made was I got caught up in making a video and I wasn't paying attention as well as I should have, and I failed when I turned the strips around so that they were, you know, contrasting, and then when I took them out to glue them, I glued two strips of the same kind, and so my board was dark white, dark white, white, dark white. I had to cut it and start over. You don't want that. I want this to be as close to correct as possible. Now, you're going to get some squeeze out, and that's fine. Sometimes you can use a dry shop towel if that's what you've got. I like to use a wet cloth, and I'll have to recenter those. Because the less you have to wipe off, the more you wipe off now, the less you've got to sand later. And I want these right. Because when I begin to tighten these clamps down, this is going to want to move around, and you have to make sure it's right. So we'll do this one. Alright, we've got 4 clamps in place, and before you start cranking these babies down, you want to make sure each one of these squares is aligned, and kind of crank like you would putting on a spare tire. You go opposite. You want even pressure on these. And as you start cranking down, 2 things are going to happen. You're going to start to get a lot more squeeze out, which is completely normal. And your board is going to want to start to bow. And the way you counteract that is by putting a brace on. And I have plenty of clamps for that. And again, you don't want to crank this down until all of your boards are secure. And another thing that I do, I don't know if anybody else has mentioned this, they probably have, I'm not original, is that all of my clamps are in the center of 2 boards, 2 checkers. And that, again, offers even pressure. See, like this clamp is here, this clamp is here. These clamps are all like that. And I'll do that again on these braces. If I can manage to get this booger on here. I will clamp these down in between the squares so that even though the boards are straight, and that's what these are designed for, you want to clamp in between the squares. We are on the tail end of this project, and I have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 clamps on here. I've got a clamp on almost every single intersection of this checkerboard on the side that I'm trying to glue together. And as I cranked it down, I had a lot of squeeze out, which you'll get. So I used a wet washcloth and wiped it out. My boy, for his birthday, I bought him some wood a few weeks ago, and he made his own chessboard. And in he made a video. Really proud of that kid. And in his video, he said, anybody who tells you you don't have enough wood clamps is crazy, because no matter how many you need, or how many you have, you need more. And that is the truth, my friends. I own over 50 wood clamps, varying sizes and brands and shapes, and I don't have near enough. Because oftentimes what happens is you're working on several projects at a time. Because like this, I won't be able to do anything with this till tomorrow. So, you start working on another project, you need wood clamps, and you don't have them. But they're like anything else, you acquire them as you go. Next year I might have 75, I don't know. But I need more. And they're not cheap. So, we'll move on. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Well, it's time to start taking these clamps off. I always like this part because it's kind of like Christmas. Or what was it Forrest Gump said? You never know what you're going to get. You're either quite pleased or you've got a, oh no, kind of reaction. Hey there, I was wrong. I thought I had put on 12 clamps, when in fact I had put on 13. But again, I reiterate that you simply cannot have too many wood clamps. Hopefully this thing kept it square. Those are the clamps releasing. Those are not the sound of the boards coming apart. If we have done our job correctly, and I fear that I have, let's see what we got here. This one's good. That is square. That is square. And just for safe measure, I know I'm right, but we are squared. That is always good. That is always good. That's what you should have. Now I will go over this with a scraper to get off the glue, and then on the front side I will begin sanding with a 60 grit sandpaper, just to kind of see if I can't take the splinters out and soften some of these edges. The real danger is making sure I don't have any dips. I'm hoping that by planing as much as I did, I've minimized the amount of sanding I need to do. Let's find out. Well, I finished with 60 grit sandpaper, and I've managed to smooth it out quite a bit. It's fairly uniform. I'm feeling the very beginning stages. I mean, you have to really feel for it. I guess they're not dips, just places where it's not completely level yet. But they're fine. It's fine for an initial sand. I think I'm going to pick out a corresponding wood to use as a small border. And then I'll put a larger border on that. That's what I think I'm going to do. So let's get to that. Alright, well, I finished my initial sanding, and I want to put a pre-border of wood that has a contrasting color. So I chose cedar, and I did the best I could at making sure that these boards were uniform. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue them together, and then tomorrow I can put on my border of walnut, which I'll cut out, and that will give a really nice contrast. Let's see if I can, because this is zebra wood, ash. This is cedar, which will give a red tint, and then this will just be a real nice contrast. This will be a real nice board when I'm done. So now I have to go about the business of gluing these together. So let's get to that. Well, I've got 2 or 3 clamps on here. I want an even pressure on the inner border as much as possible. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Once again, I've got 10 clamps. The reason that it's sitting askew is because it's sitting on these clamps, and these clamps aren't all uniform. They're different sizes. Tomorrow we'll take it off. We'll cut the borders for our cut the pieces for our outer border. Miter those at a 45-degree angle and go from there. This board's coming out really nice, so I appreciate you hanging in there. Thank you. Let's wrap it up till tomorrow, I guess. Ooh, I love woodworking. Enjoy your day, my friends. I have got my inner border secure of cedar. My chessboard has got, we're down to, I don't know, 120 on the grit of the sandpaper, zebra wood and ash, and I'm going to, now I've cut out the outer border of what looks like to be walnut. I'm not actually sure. It's just a pile of wood. And this gets tricky because I've only got one hand. I've only got 2 hands. So I'm going to glue one side of these border pieces, which are cut at 45-degree angles, and then tomorrow I'll glue this other 2 group, and it shall look, hopefully, something like this. We are down to the last leg of this chessboard. I have finished my last glue up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 glue ups. We'll take these clamps off. Again, it's a lot like opening a Christmas present. Very excited. you're either going to say to yourself, that's just what I wanted, or that's not at all what I wanted. And I have had both of those kinds of surprises. Uh-oh, that's coming loose. I don't know if that's the clamps or the wood. We'll find out. I've got some places where I'm going to need some filler. And of course I've got a sand. But all in all, fairly pleased. Fairly pleased indeed. I think the first step is to sand a little bit with some 60 grit sandpaper and try and get the marks out of the wood and try and make it flush. So let's get to sanding. I always get a little sad at the end of these little videos because it's the end. I have such a good time with this. The chessboard is finally finished. Sometimes I screw in some rubber feet, but I think on this board I'm just going to use these little felt feet that have stickers to the bottom of them so that it doesn't scratch someone's table or otherwise protected surface. And if they come off, you can get another set of 8 for $1.50. And if they come off, maybe I'll screw some in, I don't know. But I like these felt feet. They're simple, they serve a purpose, and I think they're kind of elegant in a way. The last thing I'm going to do, if I don't trip over my cord, is put a layer of beeswax on this board. Now this is, I bought this in a group package. It's 100% natural beeswax. It's got a little bit of lemon scent to it, and I really like it. It will seep into the pores of the wood, leave a nice scent, and again, I just find it pleasant. And you can rub it in any way you choose. I like to go all across the board. And I'll go around the boundaries, the border, lift her up and do the sides. Just work it in. You can use this over the polyurethane or, instead of. I kind of like the sheen of the polyurethane, and then I'll put this beeswax on just to kind of fill in the gaps. And I just like it. It's a nice scent. It's a nice cover. It gives a nice sheen. And I like it quite a bit. And that's it. That is all we have for this particular project. As always, thanks for hanging in there. Just wipe off any excess and be done.